Tonight, supreme skepticism, including from the justices on the high court that Donald Trump picked. Today, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments over the Trump administration's ability to impose global tariffs, and even the conservative justices were questioning the president's authority this time.
The vehicle is imposition of taxes on Americans, and that has always been the core power of Congress. If a tariff is imposed on automobiles, who pays them?
Can you point to any other place in the code or any other time in history where that phrase, together regulate importation, has been used to confer tariff-imposing authority?
Congress, as a practical matter, can't get this power back once it's handed it over to the president. It's a one-way ratchet toward the gradual but continual accretion of power in the executive branch and away from the people's elected representatives.
The Trump administration is citing an emergency powers law that does not use the word tariff and that no previous presidents have used to impose them. Trump lauded today's arguments as a success.
How worried are you that they may unwind this thing?
Well, I heard the court case went well today, but I just heard that a little while ago because, as you know, it was just 2 hours ago that they finished up. But I will say this, it would be devastating for our country if we lost that. Devastating. I think it's one of the most important, maybe the most, but one of the most important cases in the history of our country. If I didn't have tariffs, we would right now, the entire world would be in a depression.
In arguments today, justices on both sides expressed concern over the Trump administration's disregard for the powers held by Congress. Joining us in our fifth seat at the table is attorney Dante Mills. He is a law professor at Temple University. The Owls, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with it. Let me start with you. What stood out to you from the arguments that you listened to? It was actually really interesting listening to the different justices ask the questions, and there were some pointed ones coming from all sides of the court.
There are very pointed questions, but we can just start with Chief Justice Roberts. Why not? He's the Chief Justice. As he mentioned, generally, the Congress has the power to tax, and that's a power that's reserved only for them. Trump's lawyers or the administration lawyers are saying that this isn't a tax. What they're doing is essentially regulating imports. This is more about foreign policy, and what they're doing is trying to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. So they're regulating import to allow that to happen, and that any taxes that comes from that is incidental. The lawyers on the other side are saying that's BS. This is a tax, and only the Congress has the right to do that. Now, it is of note that Justice Alito did bring up that in emergency situations, the president does have more power. And we're going to hear this question answered of Trump has this notion now that he can decide when it's an emergency. And he's tried to use that with immigration. He's tried to use that with tariffs. I think we're going to get an answer as to whether or not a president can unilaterally decide when it's an emergency, so he should get more power.
Ben, the president has won something like more than 20 cases that have come up to the Supreme Court. Do you see this as a time after sort of hearing some of the questions that are being asked where the idea of more presidential power for this president in this case won't fly?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the characterizations of the court that I always find suspect is when people say, even the conservatives on the court are saying this. Okay, the conservatives on the court tend to be textualists, which means that they're actually looking at the text of the Constitution as opposed to sort of a vague peripheral understanding of what the Constitution means. And so when you're looking at the textualists and they are saying the president does not actually have emergency authority to simply impose tariffs on the basis of trade deficits, which is essentially what he's been doing, that is a very conservative position. I've been critical of the president, very critical of the president on his tariff policies themselves, which I think are actually economically wrong and I think are actually damaging to the country in a lot of ways on foreign policy, actually. But that's not what's at issue. The issue here is whether the president has the emergency authority to do this sort of stuff. And I thought that the best question that was asked came from Justice Gorsuch, in which he actually said to the lawyers for the president, if, let's say, the next president decides that on the basis of emergency authority, that climate change is an emergency, and therefore he's going to slap, or she is going to slap a 50% tariff on all automobiles coming into the country, would that president have the authority to do this? And the attorney for the president, President Trump, said yes, they would have the authority to do this. I do not believe that the court, I've said this since literally day one when President Trump announced Liberation. I said that day, this is illegal. The Supreme Court is going to strike this down. He does not actually have the constitutional authority to do this.
I think it's also going to be very disruptive to the economy as we get through this. I mean, let's
It
just
already
say,
has
I mean,
been.
but it has been. But I'm just saying, let's
It'll be the best thing for the economy.
well,
It'll be great.
That's what he says.
No,
But-
no. If tariffs are struck down.
Oh, well,
I
no, but I'm
agree.
saying,
I
but I'm
agree.
saying
Well,
functionally, we have a question that we have to ask ourselves, which is what do we do with the tariffs that have been collected? What do we do with the funds that have been collected?
By the way, some of them have been spent already. They're already
so
starting to dip into
those
it.
are illegitimate, illegal funds that we have now collected. I mean, I'm not sure how that works. And
But I
not
don't think
only-
the Supreme Court should be concerned about that. That's a political issue.
Correct.
I think
that's a very much
legally
a political
the
issue.
court has to decide if there's legislation that gives the authority to the president. If it is, he can do it. If not, they can't look at the consequences of it or what the outcome is. They have to decide, is that power baked in? Yes or no?
But the consequences will still be there. And I'm just saying that if we have a government right now that is highly inefficient, that is not working, that is going to be a political question that somebody is going to have to be a grown up in the room and have to answer to figure that out.
One of the things that will be fascinating is if the court does strike it down, watch the stock market absolutely explode. Seriously, you'll watch the S&P 500 jump like nobody's business, and the president is then going to be in the awkward position of having to explain why the markets are boosted by the rejection of his key
the
policies.
best example of that is going to be our American automakers. I mean, you're going to see their stock just explode. You're going to see those people who are doing that type of work, for example, who are building cars from Canada, the United States, and Mexico working together. Their stock, to your point, their stock's going to go through the roof.
Well, let me let everybody hear what we heard from Justice Amy Coney Barrett on this issue of if they decide that this is not legal for the president to impose these tariffs, what happens next? Here's what she said.
If you win, tell me how the reimbursement process would work. Would it be a complete mess?
It's a very complicated thing. There's got to be an administrative protest. There was a harbor management case earlier that this court was involved with in United States Shoe, in which, the refund process took a long time. There were any number of claims and equitable relief.
So a mess.
So it's difficult,
Okay.
absolutely. We don't deny that it's difficult.
Is there a possibility, this is to you or anyone at this table, is there a possibility that the court looks at this and says, we don't want this mess, so we're just going to rule a certain way?
No.
Or will they
I
really
can't
go?
imagine that
Okay.
happens, and I really hope it doesn't happen, because I think setting a precedent like this is actually dangerous. We're supposed to have co-equal branches of government. Obviously, Congress throughout the years has ceded a lot of power to the executive branch, but using emergency powers to essentially make policy in the executive branch is wrong. And on top of that, I understand that it is going to be a mess. I mean, think about the farmers. The farmers have been hurt quite a bit as a result of these tariffs, and it's going to cause long-term damage to these farmers. But in the meantime, the Trump administration has decided to use some of the revenue from these tariffs to help make these farmers whole. So to your point, yes, a lot of that money has already been spent already. I don't know how the refunds are going to work. I don't really care.
But
What I
one of
care
the-
more about
one
is
of the points that
president.
was made by a justice is, if this power is given, how do we get it back?
Right.
You can't get it back. So they're not going to give this power because it's difficult to figure out. Because once it's out there, there's no president that's going to relinquish that power.
It's almost as if bad and intrusive government policy that affects huge numbers of people turns into a mess, actually, as just a general rule.
Have you advised Trump on any of this?
I've been saying this clearly and openly since before liberation.
He's not listening.
Interestingly, it's a fascinating conversation about the expansion of the administrative state, which we talked about kind of on a microcosm level here in New York City when it comes to affordability.
Always
for
back to
people.
Mondani.
No, not necessarily, but there is an
forever.
appropriate conversation for us to be having about affordability.
It's a Birkenstock stamping on the human face forever.
Of course, there's a lot of experts going back and forth on whether tariffs are the right answer for this, but I do think it's important that we are seeing executive leadership on this when it comes to making America whole and making sure that we are not being taken advantage of on the global scale. That is important. So I'm hopeful that that conversation continues beyond this particular case. I know the Trump administration is very, very passionate about this. And frankly, heck, from a fiscal conservative perspective, if tariffs could replace, I don't know, the federal income tax someday, I would be cheering for that from the rooftops.
Good
When I was in the legislature, an old state legislator once told me, we were having a discussion about fees and taxes, and he said they're both three-letter words that take money out of your pocket. I mean, you can add tariff to that as well, because tariff is simply just a tax on
But there's other
American
ways to regulate imports, and I think that was part of the conversation today.
Section 202
that
authority.
if that's what you want to do, President, you have the right to do that without imposing a tax.
Correct.
And the tariff here is a tax.
All right, Dante Mills, thank you to you. Everybody else, you're going to have to stick around.